Kentucky fans have a lot of questions right now concerning their basketball team. When did losing marquee games become normal, and even worse, acceptable? Have we went from the gold standard to no standard? And can Calipari even coach in this modern era of college basketball? Kentucky is supposed to strike the fear of God into their opponents, but instead, Big Blue Nation is now scared of over half of the SEC. These are all questions that need to be answered, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to Wildcat Cave. Disappointed is an understatement for how the Big Blue Nation is feeling right now, and there are some obvious issues we need to address, so let's not waste any time and let's get into it. I'm not much of an X and O guy when it comes to basketball. I'm a fan of the sport. I have been for a long time. I understand basketball concepts and how to be successful, but I'm not sure I could draw you up a successful basketball play. I guess you could call me a basketball Benny. So instead of trying to break down each individual play, I'm going to give my opinion of overall issues with what this team is doing. Also, if you wasn't on the live stream last week, this is your first look at the background and the new setup. Let me know what you think about that down in the comments. Now, issue number one is very, very clear. It's our offensive struggles. Right now, this team averages 68 points a game versus Power 5 teams. This is a team that should average in the mid to high 70s, if not 80. Cal came out at the beginning of the season and said he wants to average 80, and he's doing that against all of the non-Power 5 teams. But in our 4 big games we've played this far, we've averaged under 70, and that is a problem. There is no flow in this offense or any off-ball movement hardly. In the last game against UCLA, there was a clear play where C.J. Frederick might have moved from the corner to the top of the key, and that is as far as he moved the entire shot clock. Sahvir Wheeler will just dribble the air out of the ball until there's under 10 seconds on the shot clock and then tries to create. That is just not his game. That's not what he does best. Sahvir is better when he gets the ball out of his hands early, gets it to his playmakers, and then they can create off of that. He's much better of a facilitator than a play creator. And then, when we do try to do something early, it's feed the ball to Oscar down low, force it to him even when he has 4 or 5 guys on him, and let him try to go through traffic or kick the outlet pass, which he hasn't been great at recently. Trying to force the ball to Oscar is great. He's the National Player of the Year. But when it's not there, we have to have a second option. And honestly, if you look at the numbers, we are better when Oscar is not our leading scorer. In games where he is not our leading scorer, our win percentage shoots through the roof. Oscar needs to be a 10 to 14 point a game guy, and then let him do what he does on the rebounding. Let Kaysen and Antonio and these other play creators and shot makers be the leading scorer. That's who it needs to be, especially in a modern college basketball offense when outside shooting is at a premium, and we have the guys to do it. Don't get me wrong, having the National Player of the Year down low is a great asset to have, and Oscar is amazing. But this team is better when Kaysen or Antonio are the leading scorers on this team and not Oscar. And on top of that, on top of all of the other offensive struggles we've seen, this team is just missing open shots. I know there's a lot of blame going to Calipari right now, and it's deserved. We will get into that a little later. But missing open shots is solely on the players. Whether Calipari draws up the correct play or not, if you're open and you miss, that can't be on anybody else. CJ has been off all year. Antonio was off in the last game. Kaysen was off in the last game. We're missing floaters. We're missing open threes. That's stuff that just can't happen. And Cal is going to have to figure out how to scheme around that and get better looks. Now, issue number 2, I think we're starting to learn these transfer players are not 5-star guys. Cal is the best coach in the country when he has elite talent, and we just haven't had that in maybe 3 or 4 years now. Cal has done really, really, really well getting the best guys out of the transfer portal, but we're coming to the realization that the best player from Illinois State isn't the same as the number one freshman coming out of college or high school. Next year's team is going to be amazing. It has the exact type of guys Cal likes. We're going to have 3 guys on the wing that can create their own shots. We're going to have good bigs down low, and we're going to run Cal's offense, and there's a chance it could be Cal's best team. But since the transfer portal opened, we've always bragged about how Cal is leading the way, and he's on the cutting edge of what's new in college basketball. And I think he saw the transfer portal as that opportunity. But now what it feels like is that he's realized that these transfer guys were at Iowa and at Illinois State and at these other schools for a reason, and it's just not the same. Yes, getting Antonio Reeves is great for this team, but he's not DJ Wagner. He's not Shaden Sharp. He's not Anthony Davis. He is not these type of dudes, and their ceilings just aren't the same. You can't coach a guy that doesn't have DJ Wagner's potential to try to force him to become that. You just can't do it. He doesn't have it in him. Antonio Reeves, I'm sure, is playing his best, and CJ Frederick is trying his hardest, but they're just not the guys Cal wants or Cal is normally coaching. And I think when the portal opened, I think Cal said, I can go here and get these guys who have, proven themselves instead of focusing on recruiting. And I think it's burned him the past 2 or 3 years. And because of that, I think that's why we saw Cal go back, hit the recruiting trail hard, and land 5 of the top 20 dudes next year. I think he has made that realization, and maybe some of the fan base has too. This could be what propels Cal forward next year and going on. Just realizing that taking 1 or 2 transfer players is better than having a whole team of them, because those ceilings for the incoming freshmen and the 4-year guys just aren't the same. There's a reason they're one and dones, and there's a reason Antonio Reeves was at Illinois State and CJ Frederick was at Iowa. The third issue I've seen is our lineups. We're just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. By this time in the season, Calipari usually has his lineup figured out. He's down to an 8 or 9 man rotation, and right now, we're still putting out our entire bench on the floor, hoping someone can make a play. I think Cal is stuck in his ways a lot by not wanting to play the small ball. It's a lineup that fans beg for every single year, and we rarely get to see. When he put Oscar and Lance in together against UCLA, my head about came off of my shoulders. Now, to Cal's credit, Lance provided a lot. They said they worked on that at Lance in the 4 in practice, and it seemed that might have been our best run of the entire game when those guys were in there together. So far be it from me to criticize that specific choice. I don't think that's going to be long-term success, however. Oscar and Lance playing twin towers down low could have worked great back in 2010, 2013. It's 2022. It's time Cal gets with the program, starts playing some small ball, and he has started to take steps towards that, I think begrudgingly. But Chris Livingston, I believe, has now earned a spot at the 4. Cal talked about it when he did it against UCLA. Chris Livingston had a breakout game. I think Cal is going to tweak that in the lineups. I think we're going to see Chris Livingston has now earned his playing time and earned possibly a starting spot at that 4 position. Again, Toppin is great, but a guy from Rhode Island doesn't have that same potential that Chris Livingston coming out of high school and is potentially a first-round pick. Chris Livingston solidified himself in my mind as a starter now. Now, if we're talking people's playing times, in my opinion, if you follow me on Twitter, you know I've been critical of Xavier. I think he has now changed my opinion to where Xavier needs to start. I used to think it was Kaysen at the 1. Xavier needs to start. He needs to play quite a bit, but I think he could cut his minutes down 3 to 5 minutes a game. He's playing in the mid-30s per game right now, which I think is just too much for him, especially late game situations. I still think he can be careless with the ball, dribble the air out of the ball, and while he can beat his man, he's not the best finisher. And honestly, Tiger Campbell against UCLA tore him up on defense. Xavier could not stay in front of him. I still think he deserves a lot of playing time. I still think he deserves to start. But I would take Xavier down to 28 to 30 minutes a game as opposed to 33 to 35 minutes a game. Also, unfortunately, I think Jacob Toppin's minutes need cut. He hasn't performed how we expected him to. He hasn't taken that jump. He played amazing in the Bahamas. Everybody's hopes got up. He scored like 50-something points in the Bahamas. Played amazing. Showed off his athleticism, and that just hasn't happened as the seasons went on. He needs his minutes cut. Like I said, I think Chris Livingston has officially taken his starting spot. At least I hope so. But if Toppin can be a catalyst for a Final Four run for this team, so we need him to really start to get going. Unfortunately, it's just not happened yet. If he can't, then there's just not going to be room for him, at least in the top 7 or 8 people in the rotation. There's guys that are earning minutes, and right now Toppin is just losing them. Same thing with C.J. Frederick. You could not put him on the court against UCLA. He put him in twice, and I don't know if CJ wasn't ready for the moment or what was going on with him. Dude couldn't even stay on his feet. Every time he tried to fight through a screen, he'd hit the ground. We can't have that. CJ is too elite of a shooter to not be on the court, especially with Reeves and with Kaysen. But right now, you just can't play him. His defense isn't good enough, and he isn't giving you anything on offense. So CJ needs to find a shot. He's another guy that if we're going to do what we want to do this year, he has to figure it out. Between him and Toppin, they could be the two that determine, are we legit or are we frauds? Are we going to make a Final Four? Are we going out in the round of 32 or Sweet 16? And finally, for lineups, I think Lance needs more minutes in tough games. I don't think every game is going to be for Lance. Oscar obviously had a bad game against UCLA, and Lance brought that fight that we needed. When we have games where other teams are trying to bully us, Lance needs more minutes. In games where we are the aggressor, I think Lance is okay on the bench. He's not a great shot creator. He's an okay defender. But in games where we're getting pushed around, Lance needs more minutes. I like Ugo. He's not ready yet. Between him and Lance, Ugo probably brings more in shot blocking. Lance is probably a touch better on the offensive end, but Lance has the fight in him that this team needs. Issue number 4. There is just no dogs on this team. And that doesn't mean I don't think these guys aren't tough. We have a ton of tough guys. Oscar is tough. Lance is tough. Xavier is tough. But being a dog does not just mean you're tough. You have to be mentally tough, and you have to have that attitude. We have a ton of guys that have one, but not the other. We have Lance has the attitude. But he's just not developed yet. Oscar is physically tough, but he might even be mentally tough. He just doesn't have that dog attitude. Kaysen, I don't know if he has that attitude. He's a great player when he gets going. I don't know if he has that stick-it-to-him attitude, though. We have a ton of guys that should be that guy. Xavier, mentally tough, knocks down free throws late. But just, I don't know that he has that killer attitude, that Mamba mentality, right? Lance is probably the closest thing we have to a dog. He might truly be a dog. He might have that attitude. He might be mentally tough. And I know he's physically tough, but his game just isn't developed enough to play consistent minutes at this level. And we don't have a guy that with that talent and with that attitude that does play. Oscar is the nicest guy in the world. He's got all of the physical attributes, all of the mental attributes. He just doesn't have that attitude. What happened to us having guys like Boogie and Wall and AD and Willie Cauley-Stein and Deron Lamb and Tyler Hero and PJ Washington? What happened to we as Kentucky and we don't give no This team needs some attitude. Go in there every game, as Cal says, we're going to show up to your place on t-shirt night, we're going to beat your team, and we're going to leave. What happened to that Kentucky attitude? We need dudes that know they're going to walk into every stadium and win. Now, obviously, you're not going to win every game. Even the 38-0 team didn't win every game, obviously. But we have to have that mentality, and we have to get back to that. We have to get back to swaggy Cal, not Cal that's making excuses. We have to get back to players that say, I'm going to Kentucky because we are the best, and we're going to go into your home court, and we're going to lay it on you, and we're not going to just win by 5. We're going to go into your place and we're going to beat you by 30 every single game. And then number 5 is the fan apathy. That's something we cannot afford as a program. It seems to have already started. That is literally a program killer. Look at Indiana. They don't care. Their team is good this year, and they don't care. You look at Nebraska football. You look at Louisville. Louisville's a top 10 program, and their fans could not care less. Top 10 historically, of course, not this year. But fan apathy, if Cal thinks the fans have turned on him now, it's better to have fans upset than fans that don't care at all. We cannot afford that as a program. I see every day on Twitter and in person fans just throwing their hands up. They don't know what to do. It's not a priority for them to watch games. They don't block out nights like they used to make sure they had nothing going on but this game. Now it's an afterthought. If they're not busy, they'll watch it. But it's not a priority. And the problem is, the way our schedule sets up right now is we just don't have a ton of games for fans to buy back in. We've seen it already. Everybody was bought in for Michigan State, and we lose. Well, good thing we had Gonzaga the next week, and then we lose. And then we have Michigan a month later, so we had to wait and play these bad teams that nobody cared about. And then we beat Michigan, and we're starting back up the hill, and then we lose to UCLA. And now we don't have another marquee game. I mean, we have Louisville on New Year's Eve, but who cares about that? They're terrible. We're going to beat them. It's Louisville, I get it, but I don't know, especially with the football game going on, how much or how present fans will be for that game. Our next big game for us to prove ourselves is going to be January 7th. We travel at Alabama, who has already beaten the number 1 team this year. If you're anything like me, like I mentioned in the opening, that game scares the life out of me. That's going to be a tough game, and if Cal wants fans to even have a chance to buy back in, that's a must-win game. And then a week after that, we go to Tennessee, who is also ranked. That's going to be a must-win game. And then we have Kansas on January 28th at home. So we have 3 opportunities in January for this fan base to buy back in. In my opinion, you can't lose to Alabama with it being the next one. And then you have to win one between Kansas and Tennessee. You cannot go 1-3 in those games. 2-3 would still be slightly upsetting depending on how the team looks. Now the good news is no one is good this year. There are no world beaters, and we have every piece a team could need to get back in it, put ourselves right back in contention for a national championship. I don't think any one team is better than all the rest by head and shoulders. I think Purdue looks good right now. But again, I don't think that they are world beaters. I think they can be beat and will be beat. So Kentucky has all the pieces you could hope for. I just hope Cal is willing to change and we get these issues resolved sooner rather than later. He had a press conference or his nightly call-in show Monday, and he said that he realizes the offense isn't where it needs to be and there are some tweaks coming. We've heard that before. We'll see how everything shakes out. But that is going to wrap up this one, guys. I'm still hopeful for this basketball season. If any coach can turn it around, I think Cal is the guy, as long as he wants to do it and knows he has to. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Have you given up, or do you still believe in this team? Make sure to subscribe to keep up with all the UK basketball news. I hope everyone has a very Merry Christmas, and I'll see you guys next week. Go Cats!